Okay, hello and welcome to the Lake George Association's webinar on septic systems in Lake George, part of our Lake Protector series of webinars, helping you to personalize your role in protecting Lake George. Over the next hour or so, you will hear from the Lake George waterkeeper, Chris Nowitzki, who will enlighten you on the risks of aging septic systems and what you can do to ensure that your system is functioning properly. He will also introduce you to our helpful educational website, safesepticsystems.org, which provides a wealth of information on how to install, care for, and even finance your septic system. This session is an outcome of our bay-by-bay approach to water quality protection. When we made this presentation to residents in Hewlett's Landing, there was a request to reach residents who were unable to attend in person. We committed to hosting this live Zoom session, which we will record and post on our website next week. You will receive an email when that is available. At the end of the session, you will have the opportunity to ask questions. Simply click the raise hand feature during the Q&A, and we will invite you to unmute yourself and ask your question. We ask that you mute yourself again once we move on. You can also leave your question in the chat function. If we are unable to get to it during the webinar, we will follow up with you directly in the coming days. Whether you live directly on the lake or anywhere in the watershed, your actions affect the lake. We hope that you will be inspired and empowered to become a true lake protector by taking positive action for the good of Lake George. Chris, it's all yours.
Great, thanks, Walt, and patience, everyone. I hope my presentation is up. Walt, do we?
Yes, we can see it just
great.
Fine.
Thank you. I feel like I'm kind of blind when that transition always happens. Thank you, Walt, for that great introduction, and thank you everybody for joining us. Again, I'm Chris Nowitzki, Lake George waterkeeper with the Lake George Association, and we're excited. There's been a lot of talk about septic systems, but we really, in the excitement by other people to find out more about that. So we wanted to talk about where we are, what we know, where we are heading, what people are doing to help this issue, and then what you need to know to better protect our lake. Again, this is part of the LGA Lake Protector series, and we'll hop right into that now. So part of our apologize for that, but our agenda will talk about the status of septic systems, some of the studies that have been done historically and recently around the lake on septic systems. We'll hop out and take a view at the safesepticsystems.org website, and you'll hear that a few times. And remember that that is a plural, septicsystems.org. We'll talk about recent actions that municipalities and agencies have done, talk about the great work that the Park Commission's doing, and then close out with financing. So here you have in front of you a map of the more than 6,000 septic systems that are within the Lake George watershed. We refer to as kind of a heat map, but you see a red dot where just about everybody's property that is not located within a municipal sewer district, such as around the village of Lake George, which you can see on the bottom of the lake, where it's kind of, you don't see the red dots. That's in a municipal district and goes to a wastewater treatment system. But what you see are the red dots of the on-site septic systems, around 6,000 plus around the lake. And you can see the majority of them are located in the southern basin, where we have the towns of Lake George, Bolton, Queensbury, and our studies with the Darren Freshwater Institute have shown, we overlaid a map here from the 2000s of the chlorophyll A concentrations in the lake, red being the higher concentrations, green being the lower concentrations. So you can see how the chlorophyll A, which is used as an indicator for algae growth, which helps indicate the nutrients growing in the lake. And you can see how that actually decreases as you go from south to north in the lake. The red is indicating over 2 milligrams per liter chlorophyll A. The green and northern end up near Ticonderoga and Hague are around 0.8 milligrams to 1.0 milligrams. So as you can see, there is an impact of anthropogenic or human impacts of sources, and those can be varied from fertilizers, stormwater runoff, non-point source loading, as well as septic systems. And other work by the Jefferson Project on Lake George, our partnership with the LGA, IBM, and Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, show that the orthophosphorus, which is a soluble reactive phosphorus, has increased 70%. Now, those numbers are low as far as numeric numbers, but it's a high percentage, and it shows that the lake is changing. And another way we know that the lake is changing is from algae. We've all seen the increased algae growth around the lake. And one of the concerns that we have in a hypothesis is that actually we're not seeing big change in the nutrient levels in the water column, but we are seeing a lot more algae growth. So what we think is that as the nutrients enter our lake, they are being taken up by the algae and feeding on those nutrients, not really changing what we see in the water column. Another thing that we can rely on are the studies that have been going on around the lake. Some of the historically studies around the lake that go back to the environmental impact statement in the early 1980s that was done for wastewater treatment around the lake, whether they would consider a pipe around the lake to collect everything or evaluate what people's septic systems are. Back in that study, they actually were taking a look at algae back in the 1980s and the quantities growing. The Department of Health, a study done by Chen of 5 systems along the western shore in the towns of Bolton and Lake George, came to a finding which is kind of intuitive, but the research showed it, that where there was a lack of soils above bedrock, that indicated that there was inadequate soils to provide adequate wastewater treatment from septic systems. And then referring to the plan for the future of Lake George, a big study that led to a lot of the groundbreaking regulations that went along with the Park Commission in establishing their mandates, estimated that there was about 15% of the septic systems around Lake George were in a state of failure. And there are a few numbers here as we talk through this presentation, but remember that 15%, because that'll come back in some of the work that the municipalities have done as well. So some of our work as we carried on in the later 2000s, we were finding that there was the increased algae growth. People were noticing that around the lake. People were saying that when they swam out to the rock that they did for the last 20, 30 years, it was now more slippery than when they did when they were climbing up their ladders on their docks. It was more slippery. So we felt that the algae was telling us something. And instead of just taking water samples, which kind of give you a snapshot on what is happening at that particular moment, we started taking a look at algae, because again, that they live in the water, they live in the substrates 24/7 and can tell us more. They really can pinpoint pollutants. There are hundreds of species of algae. Some are more prone to more salinity characteristics. Some are more reactive to nutrients and phosphorus and nitrate. Some indicate organic pollution, and that's one of the indices that we take a look at. So they developed an index, the Polymer Pollution Index, which actually they studied algae that was growing on the equipment and walls at wastewater treatment plants, and then created an index based on those species. And it provides a story of the impacts and what is going on in the lake. And so our algae monitoring really was based on what those established protocols from the EPA, the DEC, also the National Water Quality Assessment Program, and tried to use those and pinpoint what was going on around Lake George. Some of our work was being recognized by industry magazines. This is an article done in On-Site treatment magazine, recognizing our work, using that algae, taking those samples, looking at them under the microscope, and really trying to use that to pinpoint where there may be areas of concern. We also were recognized by the New York Water Environmental Association, the Lynn Enslow Award for our work on biomonitoring, as we called it, or the use of algae for studying trends and impacts to the lake. The algae, again, taking a look back in the early 2010s, the folks around Dunham's Bay and the southeastern embayment of Lake George in the town of Queensbury noticed that increased algae, and that really catalyzed an initiative. And the residents of that bay got together. There was about 75 properties. And the residents actually did a study of septic systems around the bay, and they found 21% were adequately designed, permitted, 14% were marginal. They kind of knew a little bit about the system, but 65%, 2/3 were undocumented, and they didn't know the status of those. And again, try to remember that 2/3 number of systems. And they approached the town board. We worked with them, with the Legacy Fund, and the town board recognized the need to act and take some action to address this issue. Moving forward, another study done by the town of Lake George on their septic initiative program, 2016 to 18. The town had received a grant from the DEC to do an analysis and consideration of management of septic systems in their town. We took a look at about over 400 residential parcels that were within the critical environmental area. That's the area within 500 feet of the Lake George shoreline and 100 feet of the tributaries to the lake, and wanted to develop a program that we could see, number one, what were the status and the condition of septic systems? Were there any trends, and was there any way to try to use that data to prioritize, find out about potential management areas, and how that could be made recommendations to the town. So some of the findings that came out of that was that we used review of town files. We also did a survey, and we sent surveys out to all these residents. We had a 34% response rate. In that questionnaire, that survey, we asked if they knew what their system was, what the components were. Did you know how old it was? When's the last time that you maintained that? And 34% response rate was pretty good for a government agency survey, which industry standards are about 15%. So we actually, more than doubled that. And some of the responses that we had from that survey, as well as our review of town files, we found that a third of the systems were at the normal life expectancy, about 30 to 40 years on regular, normal use of a system, but that 2/3 exceeded their life expectancy or they were unknown. So again, remember that 2/3 number. Larger data set, same type of results. 20% of the septic tanks were undersized. Now, septic tanks are sized by the number of bedrooms, not the number of bathrooms. So a 3-bedroom home is a 1,000-gallon tank, 4-bedroom home, 1,250, and so on going up. And about a third of the tanks were unknown size, which is a concern because that means that people were not maintaining their systems. And when you say maintain them, we have a photo right there that gentleman is using what is called a sludge judge. And that's how you find out. We typically say you should pump your system out every 3 years, and that's based on average daily use. However, technically you should pump it out when the tank is about 1/3 fill. So what they do is they take that clear plastic PVC tube, stick it in the tank, cap it off and pull it up, and they can really determine what the depth of solids are in your tank. And that's really how you find out when you should pump your tank out. Some of the other findings, 20% of the systems, not really any information on them. 20% of the systems use dry wells, Dry wells are approved by Department of Health. However, they provide a much lower level of treatment because they tend to be deeper in the soils. And when you get deeper in the soils, you have less of that oxygen exchange, which is important for that biological treatment that the soils provide. And you need the biology, you need that interaction with the aerobic bacteria to provide a much better level of treatment. 50% of the systems have never been maintained, and that is really the leading cause to premature failure. If you don't pump your tank out, the solids are going to go somewhere, and they're going to flow out of your tank and into your field. And then we notice the high samples that indicate excessive nutrients in areas around there. So what did we do? How could we try to manage and give recognition where areas that you should be managing and maintaining, and how do we cite those out from other areas? So we developed a prioritization map and system where we use 3 data sets, the first being site suitability, the second being the condition and status of septic systems, the third being our algae monitoring. So the first GIS data set, what influences how a site will handle wastewater and septic systems? It's the setback to groundwater or setback to surface waters. It is the slopes on the property. It is what we call the hydrologic conductivity, or the soils, how fast water travels through them, what is their porosity. You don't want soils to be too sandy or too fast, because then you won't have the contact time for adequate treatment. If they're too slow, if they're too clay, you won't get the proper treatment because water won't flow through as fast. Also, depth to groundwater, depth to bedrock. So we created a rating system, and here you can see the results of that, where the reddish orangish colors indicate where you have soils that are less suitable or sites that are less suitable. Green are the better sites. So you can see where you have limited setbacks. And we felt the 2 main aspects of this, we weighted that are the setbacks to our surface waters and what we call the hydrologic conductivity, or the information on soils. The second data set was our septic system. So we reviewed the septic systems, the permits, we reviewed the components of the system, the age of the systems, were they sized adequately, were they cesspools, have they been maintained, what was the frequency, and created another data set. Then we took the third one, which you can see in the red or orange circles, the red being more concern of algae of concern in our indices, and overlaid that. So here you can see areas where there are red, again, red indicating bad sites, septic systems of concern, green indicating better. So when we overlaid these 3 data sets, you can see where there were areas that were popping out, where those tied to concerns with the algae growing in the lake. And we were able to develop areas of prioritization and make recommendations to the town on science and on engineering principles. And we could come up with an area of concern so that the town would know where to focus management aspects, as well as provide a justification for a management system. So as we move forward, our next big project was our website, safesepticsystems.org. And right now, I will hop out of this and move to our website. So here you see the Lake George Association website for safesepticsystems.org, and I'm hoping that everyone sees that. Is that visible, Walt? So here we have the web page, and as you scroll down, again, too precious to waste, we talk about the algae and the impacts to Lake George and the algae growth that is ongoing. Again, here you see that heat map again of the septic systems. And again, if you apply that 2/3 ratio to the 6,000 systems on the lake, that's where we come up. There might be 4,000 systems at risk in the Lake George watershed. And one of the most important aspects of this project and initiative was a partnership with two lending institutions, Glens Falls National Bank and Adirondack Trust, and we'll show you information on that as well. So here you are. You see little prompts here on the home page. How do you find out if your system is safe? You can click here and you find out about your system. And we put on a series of questions. So do you know where your septic system is? There's kind of a yes, I do indeed, or what is a septic system? And you can click on this and you see that a septic system is a system that properly treats your wastewater generated from your home uses, disposing it in the ground. It's up to you to understand your system. And you click here and we actually have a guide that takes you, it wound up being about a 50-page guide, but we put it on the website. So here it talks about what is a septic system, some graphics here that can help you describe what a conventional system is, the components of your system, the septic tanks, what that actually provides, how it is sized. You know, we'll look at an old cesspool, which is what you do not want. Again, some more graphics and things on important aspects of the septic tank, the baffles that are in there, the effluent filter, which helps clean it out, the pumping of a system. We get into distribution systems and how those actually help control absorption areas. So then get back to the questions. And you scroll down, there's other ones which you know about drinking water. Do you know the age of your systems? Signs of a failing system. So again, you can click on this, find out, how do you know your system is failing? Is sewage backing up in your drains and your toilets? Are they draining slow? Are there algae blooms in the lakes by you or your streams near your home? Are there bad odors? And why does a system fail? Again, we talk about the life expectancy, improper locations, you know, actually tree roots. If you have trees near there, it can block your pipes and crush the pipes. So again, these are concerns that you need to find out and whether your system is working right. Again, some other things that you can find out, questions we have. Have you experienced slow drains or bad odors? What goes down your sink and toilet? You know, there are specific things. The LGA has put out some great educational information on that. Great cards that you can put up in your bathroom. But anything I don't want, you put down there. Well, you can go to the website again and find out more of what you should and shouldn't. The killers, you know, the household chemicals, gasoline and oils, things that will actually go into your system. And the way a septic system works is it actually, bacteria works. Bacteria helps digest the solids. Bacteria helps treat in your soils, in your absorption field. And if you put in these chemicals, gasoline, pesticides, those can actually kill the bacteria and really upset the way that your system functions. And then one other thing I will get to on here, and besides safesepticsystems.org, the other thing I want to make sure you take away from this presentation is to never use Ridex. Ridex is about the worst thing that you can ever use. And then again, we put the prompt here. Of course, Ridex rocks. I use that all the time. Well, don't, because you know, that is the worst thing, because people say that, oh, I put Ridex in and I never have to pump my tanks, but the solids go somewhere. And what happens is the solids actually get floated out of your tank and go out into your field and clog, and it can actually lead to premature failing. So if there's one thing, again, that you take away from this is that do not put Ridex in your system. So again, those are some of the questions. Other things that we have on the website, service providers. Again, we have a list of design engineers, site contractors to be in touch. So as you go through this, and if you have problems, and you need to talk to a consultant, please contact the engineers. Professional engineers are the only ones that can really design and sign a system. So start with them, work with the contractors that we have, and concern about paying for your septic system. Here we have the partnership with Adirondack Trust and with Glens Falls National Bank to provide no and low interest loans. Here's the contact information. Again, that's at the safesepticsystems.org website. You can reach out to them and find out information on how to help finance your system. So with that, I'm going to hop out and go back to our presentation. Hope that pops up to the slide that we're at. Hopefully, Walt, are we there?
Yep, you're all good.
Thank you so much. So now that we found out what is being done, now that we have this information, and what are the municipalities and others doing? So again, we talked about the Dunham's Bay, the North Queensbury Wastewater Management District, really the first wastewater management district in the Lake George Basin. Again, the residents went to the town board and really said that we want to set up a district so that it's not a centralized sewer district where they have a treatment plant, but it's decentralized. So they actually wanted management of septic systems on people's property. To help catalyze that, the Legacy Fund started a matching grant program, and 33% of the systems in that bay have been upgraded, mostly with tertiary or enhanced treatment units to provide a higher level of treatment. And we've seen, and there is hope because we have seen the change that this has provided. So our algae monitoring that we've been doing in Dunham's Bay over the years, here you can see an illustration graphic of systems that have been replaced in green since the wastewater management district went in 2015, enacted by the town board of Town of Queensbury. The red parcels indicate where systems are older and have not been replaced. And our algae monitoring, where you have the red circles with the exclamation point, show that there were increases in the organic pollution indicator, the algae of concern, as we say, where systems were replaced. There's a blue check mark, and we actually saw a reduction in the algae of concern in these areas. And that was throughout the bay. So there are simple trends that we are seeing in our sampling that can show that there can be improvements. Heard a lot about the property transfer laws recently. Town of Queensbury. So when a property is transferred, Town of Queensbury in their waterfront residential districts around their important water bodies, Lake George, Glen Lake, Sunnyside, required an inspection of the systems by the town staff. And here you can see some of the results, and these were data from a few months ago, and the numbers of inspections have increased. But you can see again, we talked earlier that the future, the study or the plan of the future of Lake George estimated about 15% of the systems were failing. Here, they found that about 20% of the systems needed major repair or replacement. About 60% needed minor repairs of about $1,500 or less. So you can see that this system is actually finding the problems. And the photo here shows a distribution box, which is the box in between your absorption field and your septic tank. And what you see here is the pipes, the outlets to the absorption field are half filled with water, which indicates that your system is in a state of failure. That means that the water leaching out to the absorption field is not draining in, and it's backing up, could be backing up into your septic tank and causing problems. The town of Bolton, 2019, also put in a property transfer law as well. Theirs was a little different than the town of Queensbury, where they actually rely on private contractors, certified septic inspectors to do the inspections and provide those reports to the town. That was a program that was actually helped with the Lake George Association to provide the funding and training for that training for the inspectors. Currently, the town of Dresden is contemplating drafting that ordinance for the properties within the Lake George watershed, which would mean the properties in Hewlett's Landing. And actually this week, the Warren County Supervisors have prepared a draft ordinance for public hearing. That'll be going on later this week, I think on Wednesday and Thursday and Friday. But again, Warren County is looking at protecting their water bodies as well. Important water bodies, important for tourism, important for property owners, and important for water quality. Recently, the town of Bolton has upgraded their septic ordinance. It was archaic. It was dated back to 1979. So back in May, they held a public hearing and adopted this updated ordinance in June. And where there were those tight properties where there may be concerns with setbacks to the lakes or to provide adequate treatment, they were encouraging the installation of enhanced treatment units. And here we have a cross section of the enhanced treatment unit. Instead of a standard septic system, this is actually a 3-chambered tank, basically a septic tank with 3 chambers. The first chamber, the one on the right, is where you have the influent come in from the house. It's really a settling chamber. You can see some of the baffles that would force the water down and up and protect water from flowing directly through. The center chamber, where you actually see some wiffle ball type materials, are where you have kind of an anaerobic type of digestion going on, where you have settling and you have actually biofilm growing on those wiffle balls, which help treat. And then you have an aerobic chamber to the right, which actually provides oxygen in there, helps the aerobic bacteria digest. And then that pumping actually provides a recirculation back to the chamber on the left. And this can actually cycle through about 5 times to increase your level of treatment and improve that effluent quality that's going out to the septic field. They were requiring these now on the island properties in the town of Bolton. The important thing to know about an ETU, higher level of treatment, more mechanical parts, and there's actually a service contract that goes on with this that you may require either an annual or a semi-annual treatment and servicing of this to make sure that it is being treated properly and maintained and that the parts are working. Now we'll get to what is happening with the Lake George Park Commission. Lake George Park Commission has the statutory powers for wastewater management in the Lake George watershed. Here you see a photo actually of effluent surfacing above a leach field, an absorption field, which again indicates that that field is not draining properly and is in a state of failure. Back in the 1990s, a Park Commission attempted to promulgate some regulations. Those wound up being challenged and lost on a technicality on their environmental review. And what our finding is that there's actually a lack of uniform standards and consistency and enforcement around the watershed. Some towns have different restrictive regulations above and beyond what New York State Department of Health Article 75A, which is the standard design standards for on-site wastewater treatment, provide. So they recognize, some of the towns, that we need a bit more protection standards. So they have, instead of 2-foot separation to groundwater or bedrock, some of their towns require 3-foot. Some require greater setback if you need a built-up system. Typically, system setback to the lake would be 100 feet. But because of the built-up systems, which have a bit more concern, you require 200-foot separation. Some towns have restrictions on what they call rapid percolation. So if you have a percolation rate, when you pour water in the soil to test it, and if that water drops an inch in 3 minutes or less, that's considered a rapid percolation, and you do not get the adequate contact time and treatment in your soils. Some of the towns restrict the use of those rapid percolation soils. So really, there needed to be more consistency and a need for better water quality protection. And what we'd like to do is really thank the Park Commission for stepping up. They heard this. They formed an ad hoc committee over the summer of people from municipalities, some supervisors, some planning board members, some planning office members, some people that were involved in enforcement. They started holding monthly meetings, and to discuss that, there were representatives from the Lake George Association on that committee. Walt Lunder and myself are both on that, as well as some design engineers. And really, they wanted to understand septic systems, their potential impact to the watershed, and whether there was a concern. And they really wanted to move forward with the development of consensus on a preferred approach and make a recommendation to the Park Commission. And what they're finding is that they are considering the potential of making a recommendation on an inspection or management system program. But another aspect that was discussed in the ad hoc committee was whether Department of Health 75A standards were good enough for water quality protection of the Class AA special waters of Lake George, whose primary use are drinking water supply and contact recreation. So they formed a technical subcommittee comprised of engineers, some consulting engineers, some members of the state agencies, New York State DEC, Department of Health. The waterkeeper also sits on that committee, and we're discussing the merits possibly for regulations above what 75A is to protect water quality. And those meetings are ongoing every other week. So the Park Commission, again, we want to thank them for being very proactive on this, putting together these committees, seeking the information. They had also done some very detailed assessments similar to the site suitability analysis. So the Park Commission determined that there's about 3,400 systems within that critical environmental area surrounding Lake George, 3,400 parcels within 500 feet of Lake George and 100 feet of streams tributary to Lake George. And once they started taking a look at those important constraints, the depth of bedrock, depth of groundwater, where there was rapid perking soils or slow perking soils, slopes, they found about 80% of those properties had one of those site constraints that could impact the way a septic system functions. So again, they're taking this data, basing decisions on science, and I believe they'll be moving forward in 2022 with some program. And so I encourage you to visit their website, Lake George Park Commission, lgpc.org or .gov. I'm sorry, I don't know the website, but we can post that and see what their information, their studies are. So the last bit of information, financing. So how can you get assistance for this? So again, the SafeSepticSystems.org program through the Lake George Association, partnership with Adirondack Trust, Glens Falls National for no and low interest loans. Go to the website, find out that contact information. We were fortunate enough to finally get recognized and get funding through New York State Septic Systems Replacement Fund. That was through the New York Infrastructure Act. Those were administered through the counties, Warren County Planning Department, Washington County and Essex County through their community resources. Washington County was through the Soil and Water Conservation District. Warren County received $340,000. Washington County was in the mid $200,000 200,000, I believe, 240 thereabouts. In Essex County as well. Washington County, it was Lake George and another water body, also up in Essex, Lake George, properties that were in the town of Ticonderoga, as well as somewhere up on Lake Champlain as well. Those funds went rather quickly. That was an annual fund. And part of the job here, we know that there's interest. It was documented by the applications that were filled out through the counties. And our job as the Lake George Association is to advocate and make sure that we can receive that funding and increase that in the upcoming years. So again, that usually gets announced after the budget times by the state in late March, early April. So be in touch with the Lake George Association about that. So starting to close out here, what can you do? And we simply put maintain, know, protect, and inspect. So maintain your systems. Again, the most important thing you can do is pump those systems out on a routine basis. Again, we say every 3 years. We told you what the process was to find that out. So maintain your systems. Know your systems. Know where your system is. If you don't know where it is, when you reach out to some professionals, go to the town hall, see if there's any records, permits on file, and know where your system is and know where your components are. Protect your system. Again, protect it from the chemicals that you shouldn't put in there, shouldn't put in paint, shouldn't put in pesticides, things like that that can really destroy how that system works, the bacteria and biology that actually operates and helps treat the wastewater system. And to inspect your property. When you have your tank pumped out, have them inspect it. Have them inspect it for cracks, the important components in your septic tank, the baffles, the T's, on the outlets to protect solids and gas or greases and oils from floating out, as well as checking to see whether water is flowing back into your tank from your pipe, your outlet. That's a sure sign of failure, or whether there's leaks coming in through cracks. And again, I'll say it just this one last time, safesepticsystems.org. Visit the website, learn more about it. So our takeaways: septic systems are impacting water quality. Studies around Lake George, our algae monitoring, as well as other watersheds, have documented that. Watersheds in the Finger Lakes and elsewhere around New York State have shown that. There is a need for consistent wastewater management regulations. Again, we cannot expect to protect Lake George if not all municipalities are on the same page and having the same approach. And again, that's why we are excited about the work that the Park Commission is taking a look at. Every homeowner with a septic system is a utility operator with responsibilities. The same way that you take care of your car and inspect that and maintain that, you as a homeowner with a septic system have to take that same approach. It's been said, what is your most expensive appliance in your house? It could be your septic system. So pay attention to that. Make sure it's functioning properly, protecting yourself, protecting your health, protecting your investment in your property. And that know that assistance is available for homeowners if they have to go through this process and upgrade their systems. Again, visit the website, safesepticsystems.org. There are information on how to maintain, your signs to keep out for your system, make sure they're functioning right, as well as contacts and service providers. So with that, we've reached the end. If there are any questions, I'll turn it over to Walt and see if there are any questions have popped up. But I want to thank you all. We had such a tremendous turnout for this seminar. Over 190 people showed up. So I just want to thank you all and keep in touch with the Lake George Association for future lake protector programs. So Walt.
Great, thanks, Chris. Well done. And we do have a few questions rolling in through both the Q&A and also people with their hands raised. So Tim Bichard, if you can go ahead and unmute yourself and please go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
We can, thank you.
Yeah, the question is mostly for Chris. You mentioned the algae study, and I'm just wondering if that was still happening, because I had signed up a couple of years ago, a property on Assembly Point.
Yep.
And I noticed the tile is still there, on the dock, so I didn't know if it was still needed or not, so.
Well, Tim, again, thank you for, and I do recall meeting you out there. That specific tile study was through the Jefferson Project. And their studies were cut back a bit with the COVID restrictions. Unfortunately, and I apologize if the tile's still there, I should drop by and pick that up. But we
all right.
at the Lake George Association have actually continued to develop a similar algae study. So we are continuing studying algae around the lake, which is an annual project that we have going on. And we're in the middle of a detailed multi-year study on that. But the Jefferson Project did put out some papers on their study that they did a couple years ago. And if you get in touch with us, we'll be sure to turn you. And I think they did outreach to the homeowners on some of the results of that. But
Yeah, I did remember saying that. I just didn't know if it was still going on.
no, that is not right now. We hope to reinvigorate that as protocols allow.
Well, thank you. You've had a very nice presentation, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Tim. We have a question from Ken Parker. Ken, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question, please.
Hi, Chris.
Yep, we can hear you. Go ahead, Ken.
I think he muted himself again. There you go.
Am I right there?
You're there, Ken.
Yep.
Great, thank you. Really great presentation. As you know, that the LGA and the Park Commission have been partners for many years on many projects. And this partnership may be the most important partnership to affect Lake George and the citizens, the property owners, et cetera, that we have come to in our lifetime. We're proud to be. I happen to have the luck of being asked to be the chairman of the ad hoc committee. And the one thing I'd like to advise everybody is that the one thing that I've heard since we formulated this project about 6 months ago and really started meeting regularly is that I've never heard a no. Everybody that we've asked to serve from all of the municipalities, all of the partnerships that we have, and we've asked them, would you mind serving? Would you mind contributing? Would you mind doing this? The professionals, the engineers, the consultants, nobody, I mean it, nobody has said no. And that's how we end up with a great ad hoc committee, which is formulating ideas for the Park Commission to deal with. A great newly elected, but they are newly selected technical committee of the engineers, the design professionals, et cetera, folks like yourself, coming up with some advice as to what could happen or what should happen. It's not our intention to tell you how to design your septic system, but it is our intention to help you design your septic system and determine which ones are working, which one we need to go forward with, et cetera, et cetera. We simply realize that there are a great number out there. Out of the approximate 6,000 plus septic systems, somewhere in the neighborhood, a little above 3,000 are in what we call our critical environmental area. And by doing the mapping with the help of the LGA, we've developed mapping that shows us and identifies each of these systems, some that are worse off than others, some that are okay. Our great job is to select the ones. How do you pick out all of the ones that, gee, ought to be done yesterday and all of the ones that should be done tomorrow? And that's one of the projects we're working on. And how do we operate a a major septic inspection system with personnel and with the associated expenses. We don't want to damage any homeowner on the lake. We're sensitive to that, but we're going to be moving forward and really appreciate this tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. And thanks for taking the leadership role on that. It's great to see us moving forward in the right direction. We have some questions in the Q&A section. Chris, I'll read a few of them off to you. Is there any way to test the soils in your absorption field if you have an older system?
You had to start with the toughest one maybe first. Well, no, that is one of the toughest things, and we are always, you know, and I worked in consulting for years before, you know, being fortunate enough to be the water keeper. And it's always cautious because you don't want to damage the fields. If you go in with a probe, if you do that, you know, really know where your field is. Make sure you're in touch with a professional engineer and a consultant to help you. There is a potential of doing some augers, but you don't want to damage pipes and damage the field. So, you know, you really need to know about your system, where it's located, and then maybe you could offset from that field just a bit if you really want to investigate in that area. But I would only do it with hand tools. Do not use heavy equipment, machinery, because the weight of those will just destroy your system. And then you'll know, then you won't need to investigate it because you would have destroyed your system and you're going to have to replace it. So,
Yeah.
But be very careful to go that route and make sure you speak with a professional.
Okay, thanks. Next question is, if residents want to test algae with the PPP or the PP index, where do we go to get timely results, and could the LGA provide an accessible lab?
Well, we've worked with consultants to do those monitoring. The one thing that we found is that our most recent study is that we've moved away from completely relying on the Polymer pollution index. And with our tile studies and the work that we knew from the Jefferson project, you know, we moved into a bit more of a diatom and other studies. So we can work with residents. I don't know what people mean untimely. It takes a while for those results to come in, you know, several months to do that. So, you know, they can contact us offline and we can put them in touch with, you know, some consultants if they want to use that service. And we're hoping to augment that along with our, again, our multi-year algae study that we have going on as well.
Great. So just reach out to us, Lisa, if you're looking for some more information on that. Has there been any testing of water quality from wells around the lake? Can water quality in wells be affected by failing septic systems?
Yes, water quality. Well, I'll take a step back. No, we have not tested the Lake George Association, to my knowledge. I don't know if you have been involved with anything on that. Unfortunately, one of our partners who used to do, and you were very involved with this testing, Walt, dropping off water samples at Darren Freshwater Institute, unfortunately has not been testing due again to the COVID restrictions and limiting public access to their facility. So we've had to, testing has had to go elsewhere, which has been a bit of a trouble. So testing can be done. Obviously, bacteria testing can be done. E. coli, total coliform. Also, nitrates could be tested as well, but those have to go to some outside labs. And unfortunately, as I said, our local resource, unfortunately, is not able to do that due to the pandemic and their restrictions. So, There was another consultant, BG3, but I think unfortunately they are not testing right now. I think due to I believe a fire may have hurt their facility as well.
Yeah, they had a fire in their lab.
Yeah, so
they're-
I've been heard that they've got to extend maybe down to laboratories or hospitals down towards Saratoga County. But we can try to find some of that information as well. But well testing is one of the indicators of failures of septic systems.
Okay, thank you. This is more about ETUs. Will operation and maintenance contracts with homeowners be enforced for the ETUs?
Yes, they have to be actually. That is in the Department of Health regulations, that if you have an ETU, that you have to have what is termed a responsible management entity to oversee the inspection and management of those systems. So when we reference North Queensbury Wastewater Management Disposal District, the one in Dunham's Bay, the town of Queensbury Town Board is the RME, or responsible management entity. So if you have an ETU, it comes with a contract for a couple of years for startup of service, and you're supposed to carry that service contract on. That contract should be on file with the management entity, and they should have, depending on the systems, there's different systems, an annual or a semi-annual inspection program.
Okay, thank you. This is a question about, I guess, ETUs on the islands, talking about Claris systems on 14 Mile Island and partnering with the state because it has the equipment to pump out the tanks. So I'm not sure if that's one that might be too complicated to get into. That might take an offline conversation.
Yeah, we can do that, but I'll give my experience. I mean, I have an ETU in my house, not a Claris. And part of the annual inspection or servicing to check the parts and make sure that it's functioning and the aerator and recirculation is working is they check the depth of the solids, similar to what they do in a septic tank. And they don't need to be pumped out as often, but they still need to be pumped out. I do not know if the state would provide those services on the islands. I really think that they need to be in touch with a service provider on that. But that can be a question offline if they want to get in touch with us. But if they have a Claris, they must have a service provider, and I would contact that service provider to find out about pumping.
Okay, thank you. Do you anticipate that there could be properties where a safe septic system cannot be sited because of the size of the lot or any of the other constraining factors that you mentioned? And if so, what is the alternative? A holding tank?
Yeah, I think that's what it is. Holding tanks under Department of Health 75A regulations are not permitted for new properties. However, they are an alternative for replacement. So we know that there are properties that are, we'll call them postage stamp lots, that are in steep slopes, limited depth to bedrock. Maybe they have no soils. And whatever soils they did have may have been compromised over the life of the cottage or home. And maybe a holding tank is the only viable resort that they have. It is kind of a last resort for a system to function. Those need to get waivers either from the local Board of Health or the Department of Health, the Glens Falls District Office. And they can be concerns because, you have to maintain and pump those out on a very regular basis. And they come with alarms, they come with water shutoff valves, and things that people have to be concerned. And it does lead, which is not a bad thing, to water conservation and limiting your water use, which is one of the best things you can do for a septic system. regardless. But that is about the viable alternative that there is, if you cannot put it in the ground.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Question, are the Bolton inspection reports available to the public? Can a private citizen look at them, especially those in one's immediate neighborhood?
I would think that they're available. We know that the program is relatively new. They've gone through some changes in the Bolton office for the good. I believe they brought on a professional planner. They now have a professional engineer as their administrator. Also have a clerk in the office. So I know they've undergone changes, but I'd be in touch with the Bolton planning office to find that out. If it's in the town files, I imagine it can be foilable, and people have the ability to access those records. So I would be in touch with the town of Bolton planning department.
Yeah, I would imagine a FOIL request would make those available. Here's a couple of questions in here, Chris, about the Warren County proposed local law. Just, I think, mostly for information to let people know that the public hearing begins at 7 p.m. on Wednesday. I don't know if you wanted to go into that any deeper.
No, I think we're encouraged about it. Again, I think it's a good first step. I think that Warren County is recognizing the importance of protecting, our water quality. That's one of our most treasured resources that we have in the county. It also protects and people's investment in their properties as well as public health. So we are encouraged by that. We've worked with the committee chair as well as other supervisors on that, and glad that they're moving forward. We encourage, we think it's in the best interest of any municipality that is interested in protected water quality, that they would support this measure.
Okay, trying to find a few here that are, we've got a question about fertilizers affecting the lake, and that's not really on point, but yes, fertilizer use does certainly affect the lake water quality because it introduces additional nutrients, which accelerates algae growth and helps and actually provides water quality degradation. But that's not really on the point of the septic systems. Question about, are there enough septic system companies around the lake to handle the demand, particularly in the more remote areas? I think the Park
Good
Commission
question.
is addressing that. Yeah, the Park
Yeah,
Commission
that
is
is a
trying to
good
address
question. And I think people are seeing that right now. A lot of the design professionals, the professional engineers are very busy. Business got really booming, which is great. Once people came out of the pandemic, or more people moved up north in this area. So the engineers, there's backup on them. And, it's a hope that there can be a supply and demand type of scenario, that as the demand reaches, that there will be the professionals to provide those services that we will need to support such a program. And, I know that that's one of the things that the chairman of the ad hoc committee, Chairman Parker, as well as other members of the committee have discussed. That's a consideration that people are bringing up, but very, very good question, and time will tell, I guess. Unfortunately, but I'm hoping that we can resolve those issues by encouraging, and if people see the level of work that is needed and coming in, that demand will get answered.
And I'm sure, as with any market, there will be increased opportunities for businesses to expand into that area.
Exactly.
Just jumping over to the chat here, I see a question. Does RV antifreeze harm septic systems?
Yes, yes. That was one of the things listed on the website as to keep out of your septic systems. Antifreeze, obviously, the chemicals in there would upset a septic tank and how things settle, as well as, potential killing the important bacteria in there. So, yes, please keep that out of your septic tank.
And any chemicals?
Any chemicals, absolutely. And I think, Walt, the legacy cards that you guys had and handed out and were in so many of the homes, list a lot of those.
Yep, and we can still make those
materials as well.
available and make more if people are interested. Question, you are asking homeowners to spend a tremendous amount of money, but how do they know where to turn and to whom to trust
Well, we're asking homeowners to have their responsibility. And really, if you're a septic system owner, it's your responsibility to maintain that system, make sure that it's protecting human health, protecting your own health. So that's all we're asking, is that you understand your responsibilities as a homeowner, as a utility operator. And that's what our website was to provide, give you those important guides to know how a system functions, know the components, know what you should know about your system. And if you see some telltale signs of pipes not draining, of your tub not draining properly, your sinks, maybe you need to investigate it. Have you had your system maintained and pumped out? And then if not, where do you turn to? So we put providers that we feel comfortable with on the website. Hopefully we've put all up there. There may be some have changed, but we put ones up there that we trust and that we would recommend to anybody that calls up our office. So we're not saying that you put out a lot of expense. What we're really encouraging you is to know your system, know what you need to do to maintain that system and have it function properly, and know how to find out if it is inspecting properly. The simple things that we always say: pump your system out. That's $200 to $300 depending on the size of your tank, and you can learn about 90% of your 90% of what your system is from a simple maintenance of a pump out. So, that's where I would start initially, if you do not have plans for your septic system, and then go from there. So,
Chris, would it be fair of me to say that if you have a healthy system and you maintain it regularly, you're going to keep your costs down in the long run?
Absolutely. As we said, expected life expectancy is 30 to 40 years for a septic system. And if you pump out every 3 to 5 years, depending on your use, you're treating your system right. And that can go actually even longer than that 30 to 40 years. So you're absolutely right. If you pay attention to the maintenance, just like a car, if you, change your oil, change your filters, do the things you're supposed to do, your car is going to run for a long time. Same thing with your septic system.
Okay. And Chris, this is coming back maybe as a follow-up to the RV antifreeze question.
Okay.
The question is, if you can't put RV antifreeze in your system, how do you keep it from freezing up over the winter?
Oh, I get it. So,
and I'm not sure that I interpreted it that way myself the first time.
I didn't either. An RV. So, I guess what they're talking about is maybe the antifreeze that they may put in lines in their homes if they shut their house down. That's now that those probably, and I'm not sure when they say an RV, I'd have to know more about the specific type of antifreeze that they're putting in. But that's, they can contact us offline. My contact information is right up there on the slide. But when they said an RV, I was thinking of, recreation vehicle antifreeze that they would put in. So I know that there's obviously plumbers that, shut water systems down and sometimes put antifreeze in, toilets or some things like that. But, those, we'll have to get that information, what they were actually referring to. I think that's what they were.
I think they're going to be, I think they'll reach out to us.
Yep.
One more here in the Q&A. Can a leach field be self-contained in a holding tank? If so, can you install an access lid?
I'm not sure on the question because
I'm not.
Yeah, the leach field, a holding tank is basically a tank without an outlet. So you only have an inlet that comes in and holds the waste that is generated from the household so that it can get pumped out and disposed of by a hauler. So there is no internal leach field. The leach field is where effluent from a septic tank or other treatment facility in ETU is disposed of in the ground for really the second and third levels of treatment in the system. So a holding tank does not have a leach field attached to it.
Okay. I think that covers the bulk of the questions that we've been seeing. Let me see here. A few additional ones.
You're doing a great job, by the way, Walt.
Thank you. So are you fielding some really tough ones here, Chris? The LGA has been reaching out to the public. If you see something suspicious, please let us know. How can a homeowner on the lake point the finger at a neighbor tactfully if he has reason to believe that the neighbor has a faulty system or the system is contributing to the degradation of water quality of Lake George?
That is a
it's a tough one.
That's a tough one, and it's always it's always touchy when neighbors have to live with in the community, but there's some suspicions or beliefs. I would always encourage somebody to either speak with the municipality. If they have records, you can always gain access to the records at the town hall, at the building, or at the planning office, whether they know that the systems are on file, to have an idea of the age. They can reach out to our office and see if we have any records on file. We've been involved, obviously, for decades on planning decisions, and be glad to talk with somebody. But that's the process that I would do. It's also, can you just ask your neighbor if they know about their system, or encourage them to. This is the first, or not the first, but maybe the second or third of many of these type of presentations that we'll have. We want to carry these on, throughout the year into next summer. So reach out to us. Maybe we can schedule one of these in your association or in your bay. Walt is working with other professionals here at the Lake George Association on the Bay by Bay program, which he referenced at the very beginning of this program. And we would be glad to host one of these type of events in your bay for your homeowners association. Maybe that's one of the best ways to reach out and educate some people that may not know about their septic systems or whether they're working. So
absolutely. I think knowledge, education, awareness is really key to this. We have another question hand raised. So Bob Ashton, if you would like to unmute yourself, please ask your question.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Thank you.
Sure can, Bob.
My question is there an ultimate goal of having a lake-wide required inspection of all septic systems, whether it's, one time or on a periodic basis? And if so, what are the challenges of getting there?
Well, I think that that's one of the main questions that the Lake George Park Commission is focusing on their ad hoc committee. Is it a one-time inspection? And if it is just a one-time inspection, is that going to provide the long-term benefits that you need for the protection of Lake George and the drinking water quality that it is? So those questions are being discussed. Park Commission staff has done outreach to, this concept of routine inspection and septic system management programs. There's lakes around the Finger Lakes, Cuco Lake, Canandaigua, others, as well as down Otsego Lake, already have these type of management programs around. So they are reaching out to these established districts that have been around since the 1990s to find out how their programs have worked, what has worked, what hasn't. For myself, just speaking for the waterkeeper, I think a more routine inspection program would probably provide the better long-term protection for the lake. But again, that is the questions that the Park Commission, are asking, and relying on the data that they've collected from the number of systems that are within the critical environmental area. Does it apply to all systems, whether they are 2,000 feet from the lake or whether they are 200 feet? So those are, the questions that are ongoing and the balance that needs to be found.
Chris, can you clarify on the critical environmental area? Can you give us the
Sure.
exact distances?
Exact distances are 500 feet from the shoreline of Lake George, as well as 100 feet from tributary to Lake George, the streams, the regulated streams to the lake.
Good, thank you. That answers a question that just popped up. That's great. Thanks. Okay, I think we've covered most of the topics that were raised. I don't know if you have any closing remarks. Okay, hold on a second. This is not exactly on point, but it's a great question. I don't know if you have the answer, if I can come up with it, but whose lake is cleaner, Lake Tahoe or Lake George?
Of course, Lake George, right?
Of course. Absolutely. Okay, I think on that note, we can wrap it up.
Yeah, well, I just would like to, I'll let you do the closing remarks, Well, but I just really want to thank everybody. The interest was really astounding to me, and glad that we had this level of interest, and just look forward to more opportunities. You see the email contact up on the screen, so contact me or other folks at the LGA, and thank you again for coming out and logging on this evening.
Thank you all for being part of it. Thank you for the time, and look for an email from us letting you know that this has been posted on the website. Okay, thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks a lot. Good evening, everyone.
Have a great night.